Hello, this is Melanie Guralnick, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the February 3rd issue of the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Radio Reading Service. The first story is Don Lemon says his arrest was intended to embarrass him. This is very serious. By Danette Wilford. Don Lemon is opening up about his arrest last week and defending his coverage of an anti-ICE protest in Minnesota. The journalist appeared Monday night on Jimmy Kimmel Live, where he detailed the moment he was detained and beyond. "There's a lot I cannot say," Lemon told Kimmel. "But what I will say is that I'm not a protester. I went there to be a journalist. I went there to chronicle and document and record what was happening. I do think that there is a difference between a protester and a journalist." What happens next? Lemon was arrested on Thursday in Los Angeles by federal agents, following his coverage of anti-ICE protesters storming a Minnesota church last month. The 59-year-old was released without bond on Friday and is expected to plead not guilty, according to his lawyers. When Kimmel asked Lemon how he was feeling, the former CNN anchor admitted, "I don't know. That's an honest answer." He then continued, "I'm okay. I'm not going to let them steal my joy, but this is very serious. These are federal criminal charges." 3 others involved in the January 18 protest at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, were also arrested, all at the direction of Attorney General Pam Bondi, who said on X that it was in connection to what she described as a, quote, coordinated attack on House of Worship. Lemon has been charged with conspiracy to deprive the church congregants of their rights and interfering by force with someone's First Amendment rights. But the journalist has maintained that he did not participate in the protest and was there to cover a story. When things got real. Lemon told Kimmel that he hadn't been concerned about being arrested, until it became more than just a threat on President Donald Trump's social media feed. The ex-CNN star revealed that after retaining a lawyer, he even volunteered to turn himself in to keep things low profile, but he said he never heard back from them. He explained, "That is customary in a situation like this, that someone would be allowed to turn themselves in. People who are accused of much worse things than I am accused of doing, they're allowed the courtesy. I mean, Donald Trump was allowed the courtesy to turn himself in." As for his actual arrest, which came the day after he covered a Grammys event, Lemon returned to his hotel when he was suddenly grabbed and put in handcuffs. "They took me outside. FBI guys were out there. It had to be maybe a dozen people, which is a waste, Jimmy, of resources," Lemon said. "They want to embarrass you. They want to intimidate you. They want to instill fear." Lemon versus Trump. Lemon addressed a crowd outside the courthouse following his release, saying, "There is no more important time than right now, this very moment, for a free and independent media that shines a light on the truth and holds those in power accountable." He added, "I will not stop now. I will not stop ever." The following day, Trump was asked by reporters about Lemon's arrest. "I don't know anything about the Don Lemon thing, but he's a sleazebag. He's a wash-up. Probably from his standpoint, this is the best thing that could happen to him," Trump said. "He's got no viewers. He's a failure. He's a failed host, and now he's in the news." There is a picture of Don Lemon during his Jimmy Kimmel Live appearance on February 2nd. He's wearing a kind of a tan jacket over a brown shirt and a nice silver watch. He is mid-speech, and you can, behind him there is a night picture of high-rise buildings that have the lights on. Photo courtesy of Jimmy Kimmel Live via YouTube. That story was Don Lemon says his arrest was intended to embarrass him. This is very serious, by Danette Wilford. The next story is Warmington. Gunner's Highway of Heroes repatriation set for today, by Joe Warmington. Canadians will be flying the flag Tuesday in honor of returning soldier Sebastian Halmagian. Once again, our 40-foot Canadian flag will proudly welcome our hero home on the Avenue Road Bridge in Toronto, said the Canadian Heroes Foundation, or CHF, on its website, adding, "There are many bridges along the 401 for you to pay your respects as well." The flag-draped casket of Gunner Halmagian is scheduled to land at CFB Trenton at 2:45 p.m. He will be repatriated to Canada from Latvia, where he died Thursday, in a special ramp ceremony that will include up to 60 members of his Royal Canadian Artillery Regiment from CFB Gagetown, NB, his family, and his girlfriend. The 24-year-old, known by those close to him as Sebi, is much loved, in life and in death. His devastated family, who still have not been told the cause of death that is currently under investigation by the military police, will feel that love today along the Highway of Heroes. Canadians appreciate the 3-year member of the military service and sacrifice, and don't take for granted that a young man from Hamilton signed up to wear that uniform and go over to the former Soviet Union as part of the NATO Operation Reassurance mission to protect Latvia from a potential threat from Vladimir Putin's Russia. But the biggest question I am receiving is, where do I go to be able to thank this fine young man for his service? Thankfully, repatriations are rarer now. I had forgotten a lot of years have gone by since all those difficult times during the war in Afghanistan, when we had 2 decades of repatriations from CFB Trenton to the Center of Forensic Sciences in Toronto. So, for many, this will be their first experience of the Highway of Heroes. There are many options, and I will explain what I know here now. What to know about the repatriation. The plane landing at 2:45 p.m. in Trenton is the best reference point to go by. If the motorcade leaves the base at 3:15 p.m. and the procession moves at 100 kilometers per hour, you can do your own calculations on each bridge they will hit on the way to the final destination in Toronto. If it leaves at 4 p.m., as the CHF has posted, the sun could be down by the time it gets to your location. However, first it has to be said, if you're going to go out to the highway today, be very careful. Safety first. Dress warmly, be careful parking, walking to bridges, and traversing slippery roadways and sidewalks. The CHF suggests to bring a shovel. It's also good to remember if you're in the Greater Toronto area that you may end up in the dark by the time the motorcade passes by. You do not have to go out to a bridge to express your appreciation for the gunner's sacrifice. The Canadian military is live streaming the ramp ceremony via Facebook, and others are looking to live stream from other locations, including from the final destination at the Center of Forensic Sciences near the Keele Street exit. The Highway of Heroes has always been an organic movement, and it requires a certain amount of grit and commitment to partake in it. It's not always a comfortable environment, especially in winter. It's not like going to a play or a game or a concert. It's a lot of waiting and a very quick happening once the procession gets to wherever you are standing. But it is a selfless way to show a person's appreciation and patriotism, while providing some comfort to a grieving family. While Halmagian loved his girlfriend and was hoping to buy a house when he returned from deployment, The enthusiast of mixed martial arts was a soldier's soldier, and his father, Alan, told longtime friend and Toronto Sun reporter and editor Chris Doucette that his son would not want his death to dissuade any young person from joining the military. Where to go and the timing. It's always a little bit of guesswork, but with today's technology, there's a lot of information that develops once the procession gets moving. And there are estimates of when the hearse and accompanying motorcade will roll to specific spots. Many people stand along the roadways in Trenton or at the fence of the base and pay their respects that way. Then on Highway 401 heading west, there are many overpasses people have stood on in the past. The bridges at Grafton, Brighton, Cobourg, Port Hope, Bowmanville, Oshawa, Scarborough, and Avenue Road have in the past been good locations to gather with other Canadians to participate in this homecoming of a soldier who died overseas. For many years, the repatriations would travel into downtown Toronto and land at the old coroner's office at 25 Grosvenor Street. But that has changed now, and the procession goes to the new Centre of Forensic Sciences, Toronto at 25 Morton Shulman Avenue, which is just north off of the Keele Street exit from the 401, not far from Wilson Avenue. There is a roadway there and traditionally a place where people have gathered. But whether you watch online or attend an overpass in person, you are united in making sure this gunner gets the thank you he has earned. He was a Canadian kid who died overseas representing Canadians. There is a picture of Sebastian Halmagian. He is attending a recent mixed martial arts event with his dad, and they're sitting on some folding chairs with their arms on their knees, watching intensely. Sebastian is very young looking with brown eyes and a medium colored brown hair that is pretty long, comes down to his shoulders, and his dad is bald and smiling looking at the camera. There is no photo credit given. There is another picture of Sebastian. It appears to be taken from the outside of a helicopter, looking in the window where Sebastian is seated inside. He's in all of his tactical gear and a beanie, and he's holding his cell phone up like he's taking a picture of the photographer taking his picture. Photo supplied by Alan Halmagian. That story was Warmington. Gunner's Highway of Heroes Repatriation set for today by Joe Warmington. The next story is Dave Hodge unrepentant about pen flip that ended his run on Hockey Night in Canada by Lance Hornby. It was the Jose Bautista of pen flips, one that cost Dave Hodge the most prestigious sports broadcasting job in the country. Almost 40 years later, the 81-year-old Hodge doesn't regret it one bit. Judging from the applause when he retold the tale at Monday's NHL alumni lunch, he's still respected for his split-second call-out of his network for leaving an overtime game for the 11 p.m. news. What I essentially said was finish what you started. Former host Hodge told his audience at Scotiabank Pond in Toronto, where he and Hockey Night in Canada colleague Brian McFarlane were luncheon guests. I received hundreds of letters afterwards, and never saw one telling me to take it back. It was March 14, 1987, and Hodge was hosting a Maple Leafs Calgary Flames game that ended early, so HNIC switched to Philadelphia, Montreal. That one went to overtime as the top of the hour encroached and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation elected to divert from the rest of the game to the news, leading with the NDP leadership convention. A visibly angry Hodge used his sign-off to vent to about 1 million confused viewers. Hodge outburst is legendary. That's the way things go today in sports and this network. The Flyers and Canadians have us in suspense, and will remain that way until we can find out somehow who won this game, or who's responsible for the way we do things here. Good night for Hockey Night in Canada. He then spun his stylo in the air to underline his anger. It was a pen, not a pencil, he said, correcting a long-standing misconception, adding stories that the famous pen was retrieved by a collector in Vancouver or somewhere else are likely untrue. Only viewers in Quebec who'd been watching Habs Flyers all night were able to see the overtime period. It stayed 3-3. I think in Western Canada, they had to watch the Flintstones, Hodge joked. Hodge was immediately suspended by his bosses with an option to return if he apologized. But he quit before getting fired outright. Ron MacLean was brought in as host and is still there, while Hodge went to work full-time in Vancouver, where he'd already moved from Toronto for a weekly job running CKNW radio sports and hosting Canucks games. He had been a dominant voice on the airwaves with CFRB in Toronto, calling Argonauts football, and remained active with TSN in later years. That story was Dave Hodge unrepentant about pen flip that ended his run on Hockey Night in Canada by Lance Hornby. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Savannah Guthrie prays for missing mom's return. Bring Her Home by Eddie Chow. Today show host Savannah Guthrie is praying to God, hoping for a safe return of her missing mother, who police believe was abducted in her sleep. In a social media post on Monday night, Guthrie thanked her followers for their prayers for her mother, Nancy, 84, who was last seen at her Catalina Hills, Arizona home on Saturday. The Guthrie family reported her missing on Sunday. Thank you for lifting your prayers with ours for our beloved mom, our dearest Nancy, a woman of deep conviction, a good and faithful servant. Raise your prayers with us and believe with us that she will be lifted by them in this very moment, wrote Guthrie. We need you. Bring her home. Blood found in the home. Authorities told the Los Angeles Times that blood was found along with signs of forced entry at Nancy's home. They also fear that it may be a possible kidnapping or abduction. It wasn't immediately confirmed who the blood belonged to, the Times reported. At this point, investigators believe she was taken from the home against her will, possibly in the middle of the night. Kevin Adger, a spokesperson for the Pima County's Sheriff Department, said, "Detectives are looking into a possible kidnapping or abduction." Cops also announced a U.S. $2,500 reward, along with appeals for any details, images, or video that may lead to the arrest of Nancy's alleged abductor. Mom failed to show up for church. Nancy was reported missing on Sunday after she failed to show up for a church service. Her vehicle and cell phone were left at home. Authorities hoped phone data could help point to when she was kidnapped, ABC News reported. DNA evidence found at her home is being investigated, News 4 Tucson reported. Cops say Nancy cannot walk far on her own and relies on life-saving medication. Sheriff Chris Nanos stressed that time is vital in searching for the missing 84-year-old. It's been better than 24 hours, and the family tells us if she doesn't have those meds, it can become fatal, Nanos said. Pulling out of Olympics. Page 6 reports that Guthrie, who was due to be in Italy for the start of the Winter Games on Friday, will be dropping out due to her mother's suspected abduction. Guthrie was to be at the Olympics for a week with former co-host Hoda Kotb. There is a picture of Nancy Guthrie. It is actually the missing person report. It shows on the top, missing person in red, the sheriff's office symbol to the right, missing person vulnerable adult, Nancy Guthrie, age 84, sex female, height 5'5", weight 150 pounds, hair brown, eyes blue. And the picture of her shows her in a blue velour sweatshirt. Her hair is short and brown. She's got a big smile. A photo courtesy of Pima County Sheriff's Department via AP. That story was Savannah Guthrie Prays for Missing Mom's Return. Bring Her Home by Eddie Chow. The next story is 8 trade ideas for Toronto Raptors ahead of NBA deal deadline by Ryan Wolstadt. Way back on Media Day, at the start of training camp, Toronto Raptors general manager Bobby Webster basically called his shot. At least one move would likely be made at some point during the 2025 through 26 season to alter the roster. It wasn't exactly a Babe Ruth pointing to where he'd hit his next home run type of moment, but ever since we've all been waiting for Webster to make an alteration to a roster that has overachieved, but could use more shooting and size. The likelihood of this team being the same team by the end of the year is probably 0, Webster had said back in September. Put on top of that, with one move you can get under the tax. So I don't see that as the urgent piece. The answer had come to a query about whether the Raptors would be allowed to pay the luxury tax, the first of a series of penalties for NBA teams spending over the league's salary cap. Over the first 30 seasons, the Raptors only ended a year over the tax twice, the year they won the title and, also once by a small amount, during the Vince Carter era. Which leads us to Thursday's trade deadline and keeping expectations in check. While Toronto has been linked to superstars like Giannis Antetokounmpo and Anthony Davis, a 3-time All-Star in Domantas Sabonis, and even a solid starter like Daniel Gafford, amongst others, the most likely course of action Thursday is a trade that shifts the Raptors under the luxury tax. The team is just shy of $1 million over the luxury tax, so it theoretically wouldn't take all that much to duck under. That said, a Sportsnet's indispensable Blake Murphy pointed out in his trade deadline primer Monday, other factors mean Toronto should probably leave some breathing room and not just cut the $967,000 they are over. To be safe, they should probably aim to about double the savings to closer to $2 million. The difference between a tax-paying team and a tax-receiving team is the latter groups get payments, the tax, from the big spending teams. And this year that amount is projected to be about $14 million per recipient. It wouldn't make sense to pay the luxury tax unless it came along with a bold move to acquire a top talent. Don't bet on that. The Raptors would ideally not only get under the tax, but also bring in a player that can help, like a big man. To do so, they might have to incentivize their trade partner with a second-round pick or 2. So far, there has been a reluctance to surrender a future first-round pick in such a deal. In any event, the following are not sourced trade ideas, but rather the type of framework of a variety of moves that might make sense for the Raptors on Thursday, as well as the teams they are negotiating with. Each is compliant with NBA trade rules. Idea number 1. Raptors trade Grady Dick, Jonathan Mogbo, and a second-round pick to New Orleans for Yves Missi and Carlo Matkovic. Quick summary. The Raptors remain confident Dick will develop into a solid player, but the former number 13 overall selection has had a rough third campaign, and you have to give something to get something. In Missy, they'd receive a 21-year-old true center who can block shots and rebound well while scoring efficiently in the paint. He can't shoot free throws or three-pointers, but projects as a good backup center who would fill a need. Mogbo has become a forgotten man after being the first pick of the second round a few years ago, supplanted in part by this year's prized rookie Colin Murray-Boyles. Matkovic is a 6'10" outside shooter with some similarities to Sandro Mamukelashvili. Both teams would be under the luxury tax after this deal. Idea number 2. Dick and Ochai Agbaji for Kevin Looney, Matkovic, 2 second-round picks. Quick summary. Everyone gets under the tax. Raptors get some big man depth and a pick. Looney is not the player he once was, but is an effective third center with championship pedigree. Once upon a time, the Raptors front office, which included Webster, was high on Looney and had considered him as a draft prospect. This probably isn't enough for the Raptors to bail on Dick. Idea number 3. Dick and Agbaji to Chicago for Ayo Dosunmu, Julian Phillips, conditional second-round pick. Quick summary. Dosunmu is a solid combo guard who is having a breakout shooting season, though he shot over 40% on three-pointers one other time in his previous 4 seasons, and can also defend. He's set to become an unrestricted free agent, which is why Chicago might prefer to land Dick, who is still on his rookie contract, and then will become a restricted free agent. Toronto wouldn't get front court help, but Dosunmu would be an ideal backcourt fit. Both teams would be under the luxury tax with this one. Idea number 4. Agbaji to Phoenix for Nick Richards. Quick summary. This was a popular rumor mill scenario a few weeks ago, but doesn't get either team under the tax and actually increases Phoenix's tax bill, so would need some tweaking and a pathway is hard to find. Idea number 5. Agbaji and Mogbo, and a second to Washington for Marvin Bagley III and Julian Champagnie. Quick summary. Toronto gets well under the luxury tax and adds 2 serviceable players. Bagley should not have gone second overall in 2018, but he can get buckets and rebound and even shoots the odd three-pointer. Don't ask about his defense. Champagnie, like his twin brother Justin, a former Raptor, has become a reliable two-way wing. His brother might be the superior player at this point, but Champagnie can defend, rebound, and shoot, and would be a rotation piece for Toronto. If there's nothing else out there, this would be a low-cost way to improve the rotation and get under the tax. Washington could take a flyer on Mogbo and see what Agbaji, who had a good 2024 through 25 season and has a strong NCAA pedigree, could do. Idea number 6. Agbaji and Mogbo to Orlando for Goza Bitadze. Quick summary. The salaries match nearly exactly, so neither team would avoid the tax. But Orlando would ditch the $7.6 million owed to Bitadze, now its 3rd or 4th string center, for next season. Since the Raptors are so weak up front, whether Jakob Poeltl is healthy next year or not, and with Bitadze's countryman Mamukelashvili likely to test free agency, taking on Bitadze's remaining deal would still be a positive. He can play. explaining to Keith Pelley and ownership that they couldn't duck the tax probably wouldn't be ideal for the Raptors. But this move would make them a fair bit stronger immediately and moving forward. It would limit their spending this summer, though, if they want to stay under next season's luxury tax. For this year, perhaps they could find a way to pair this idea with another that gets them under with a separate trade, maybe involving Dick and or a second-round pick. Idea number 7. Dick and Mogbo to Indiana for Jay Huff and Ben Shepherd. Quick summary. Raptors get under tax, get a gigantic backup center who can guard the rim and shoot three-pointers, and a prospect taken 13 picks after Dick, who was supposed to be a shooter but hasn't proven himself, for another guy like that in Dick, plus Mogbo. Idea number 8. Agbaji Mogbo and a second-round pick to Brooklyn for Day'Ron Sharpe. Quick summary. Toronto gets a good young big man and under tax for a limited cost. The bonus is while Scotty Barnes loses a close friend in Mogbo in this hypothetical deal, Sharpe's also a longtime friend and high school teammate of Sharpe. Brooklyn would probably want a first-round pick, though, as the Pelicans would with Missy, and it's hard to see the Raptors parting with one for either. That story was 8 trade ideas for Toronto Raptors ahead of NBA deal deadline by Ryan Wolstadt. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Indigenous Tribe that owns land under Billie Eilish Mansion has message for singer by Danette Wilford. The Native American tribe that owns the land under Billie Eilish's Malibu mansion is sending a message to the singer following backlash over her, quote, stolen land statement during her Grammys acceptance speech. Eilish, her brother Phineas, and their Ice Out pins were on stage to accept the Song of the Year award when the 24-year-old singer went into virtue signaling mode. Quote, as grateful as I feel, I honestly don't feel like I need to say anything but that no one is illegal on stolen land, she said. I feel like we just need to keep fighting and speaking up and protesting. Our voices really do matter, and the people matter. Eilish said before adding, fuck ICE and another thank you. What the tribe says. The Tongva tribe, the indigenous inhabitants of the Los Angeles Basin known as the First Angelenos, had a message of their own for Eilish, whose multi-million-dollar mansion sits on their ancestral land. The tribe revealed that the Birds of a Feather singer should explicitly reference them when speaking about stolen land. Eilish has not contacted our tribe directly regarding her property. We do value the instance when public figures provide visibility to the true history of this country, a Tongva spokesperson told the Daily Mail. It is our hope that in future discussions, the tribe can explicitly be referenced to ensure the public understands that the greater Los Angeles Basin remains Gabrielino Tongva territory, the spokesperson added. While some of the singer's fans praised Eilish for speaking out, others mocked her for her comment. What about if we all showed up to her mansion and said, we're going to live there now? It's stolen land, right? She doesn't own it, one ex-user commented. Meanwhile, she's still chilling in her Hollywood Hills fortress with armed guards and a moat of privilege, political commentator Brandon Tatum noted. If the land's so stolen, sis, hand over the keys to the nearest tribe or migrant family. British journalist Julia Hartley Brewer agreed, calling Eilish a blithering idiot, and chalked up her stolen land comment to silly celeb posturing. U.S. Senator Mike Lee of Utah wrote on X, quote, "Any white person who does a public stolen land acknowledgement should immediately give his or her land to Native Americans. Otherwise, they don't mean it." There is a picture of Native Americans from the Tongva tribe, and they're attending a celebration of the first Indigenous Peoples Day. The photo was taken in 2018, and you see about 7 people in this crowd, and they're wearing Indigenous clothing. Some men are shirtless, some have a feather, I don't even know what you call this. It's like a sash, and they have feather headdresses. They're holding different items. One woman is holding a bowl. They're wearing beads and other beautiful things like that. Photo by Frederick J. Brown via AFP via Getty Images. There is also a picture of Billie Eilish taken from the Grammys that were on February 1. She is wearing a black and white outfit with a black men's tie. Her hair is very, very dark brown and straight, parted in the middle, and she has these very intense light blue eyes, and she's looking up. And behind her you can see the logo for CBS. Photo courtesy of Amy Sussman via Getty Images. That story was Indigenous Tribe That Owns Land Under Billie Eilish Mansion Has Message for Singer by Danette Wilford. The next story is Australian Boy Made Superhuman Swim to Save Family Swept Out to Sea by Eddie Chow. A 13-year-old boy is getting praise after swimming for hours to save the lives of his mother and 2 siblings, who were swept out to sea in Western Australia. Austin Appleby and his family were vacationing in the town of Quindaloop, situated on Geograph Bay, about 250 kilometers south of Perth, on Friday when strong winds blew the inflatable paddleboards and kayak they were riding offshore, Western Australia Police said in a statement. Austin tried to paddle to shore in the kayak before it took in water. That's when he abandoned the kayak, removed his life jacket, and swam 4 kilometers back to the beach to raise the alarm to alert authorities that his mother, Joanne, 47, brother Bo, 12, and sister Grace, 8, were stranded. The swim took him about 4 hours. Waves were massive. In an interview with the Associated Press, Austin said he took off his life jacket because it impeded his swimming. He said he tried to focus on positive thoughts as he swam for hours looking for the shore. "The waves are massive and I have no life jacket on. I just kept thinking, just keep swimming, the teen said. "And then I finally made it to the shore and I hit the bottom of the beach and I just collapsed." Originally from Perth, the Appleby family had rented kayaks and paddleboards from their hotel around noon when a rough water and wind conditions dragged them out to sea. Austin reached the shore and alerted authorities around 6 p.m. A search helicopter found his family wearing life jackets and clinging to a paddleboard at 8:30 p.m., authorities said. They had drifted 14 kilometers out from Quindaloop, spending up to 10 hours in the water. Swim was superhuman. The Naturalist Volunteer Marine Rescue Group aided authorities in the rescue of the Appleby family. Once Austin reached the shore, a group comprised of Western Australia Water Police, local volunteers, and a helicopter launched the rescue effort. Naturalist Marine Rescue Commander Paul Breslin praised Austin, telling the Australian Broadcasting Corporation that the boy's heroic swim through choppy waters was superhuman. "He swam in, he reckons, the first 2 hours with the life jacket on," Breslin said. "And the brave fella thought he's not going to make it with a life jacket on, so he ditched it, and he swam the next 2 hours without a life jacket." Police Inspector James Bradley said the actions of the 13-year-old boy cannot be praised highly enough. His determination and courage ultimately saved the lives of his mother and siblings, said Bradley. What his mom said to him. Joanne Appleby told local media she'd sent Austin out for help because she couldn't leave the 3 children. One of the hardest decisions I ever had to make was to say to Austin, "Try and get to shore and get some help. This could get really serious really quickly," she told Australian Broadcasting Corps. The mother said she was confident he would reach shore, but was filled with doubt as the sunset set and had yet to arrive. "We kept positive. We were singing and we were joking, and we were treating it as a bit of a game until the sun started to go down. And that's when it started getting very choppy. Very big waves," she said. Joanne said she and her children were shivering, and Beau had lost sensation in his leg due to the cold water. "I have 3 babies. All 3 made it. That was all that mattered," she said. The family was medically assessed but didn't require a hospital visit. There is a picture of the Appleby family posing after their rescue, and Mom is wearing a blue baseball cap and glasses. She has long brown hair, and all 3 kids are cuddled up very close to her, and all 3 boys have brown hair and are very cute. Photo by Brianna Shepherd via AP. That story was Australian Boy Made Superhuman Swim to Save Family Swept Out to Sea by Eddie Chow. The next story is Donald Trump Warns China Will End Ice Hockey in Canada by Brian Towie. U.S. President Donald Trump claims that China will end ice hockey if they take over Canada, following a trade deal struck by the 2 nations. Angered by the recent trade agreement, which includes relaxed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and Canadian canola oil, Trump is warning that China will, quote, take over Canada and do away with hockey, adding that the U.S. will economically punish Canada should it continue on with China, according to Britain's Daily Mail. "If Canada does a deal with China, we will do something very substantial," Trump said. "I have a great relationship with China and President Xi Jinping, but we don't want China to take over Canada. If they make the deal that he's looking to make, China will take over Canada, and the first thing they're gonna do is end ice hockey," said Trump. Trump rattling economic saber. Trump has threatened Canadian sovereignty before, saying that he would love to see Canada become the 51st state, and repeatedly referred to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as Governor Justin Trudeau of Canada. Trump's latest threats include a 50% tariff on all aircraft made in Canada, until Canada certifies U.S.-made aircraft, and decertification of Canada-produced Bombardier Global Express business jets. Canada-China trade deal. In a bid to diversify Canada's trading partners and to reduce reliance on the United States, Prime Minister Mark Carney agreed on a number of measures with China's president. Once Canada's largest market for canola seed, China is expected to reduce tariffs on canola by 15% from the current rate of 84% by March 1. China will also allow Canadians to enter the country without a visa. Canada, in return, will import 49,000 Chinese EVs under a tariff of 6.1%. More countries turn away from U.S. Canada isn't the only country seeking new relations with the Asian economic giant. Traditional American allies are seeking deals with China following the president's recent demands to take Greenland from NATO ally Denmark. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently met with Xi in Beijing to strengthen ties, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is expected there next month. That story was Donald Trump Warns China Will End Ice Hockey in Canada by Brian Toey. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Sun on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next story is Rescuers Saved 450 Pet Rats. Now they're trying to get people to adopt them. By the Washington Post. Frankie Floridia is used to getting calls about all sorts of animal rescue situations. A kitten stuck in a storm drain, a raccoon with a jar on its head, a deer tangled in a hammock. We respond to the calls that are very difficult for homeowners and other people to do, said Floridia, the president of Strong Island Animal Rescue League on New York's Long Island. I've seen it all. Nothing shocks me anymore. Earlier this month, however, his team received a call from the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office that startled even him. Hundreds of domestic rats were found in a now condemned house in the New York City suburbs. This is a unique case, Floridia said. There were two options, he said. Exterminate the rats or rescue them, a task requiring immense effort. The humane thing to do is not use an exterminator and save these little animals that are happy and want to live, Floridia said. He and his team agreed to rescue and rehome the rats, many of which had wounds and other health issues. Domestic rats, sometimes called fancy rats, differ from wild rats, as they have been bred as pets and are usually smaller, tamer, more social, and easier to handle than wild rats. Domestic rats also have a wider range of coat colors. A group of about 10 volunteers have so far trapped more than 450 rats, with roughly 40 more left in the home in Rocky Point, about 72 miles from Manhattan. They called the mission Project Ratatouille. The rescue effort has been challenging, Floridia said, as rats can be tough to catch. Some were trapped by hand, others with nets. They're in the walls, they're in the cabinets, they're in the drawers, they're in the couch, Floridia said. They were basically everywhere. Once captured, the rats are separated by gender to prevent further breeding. Females can give birth to 8 to 18 pups every 3 to 4 weeks. Floridia said he suspects the homeowner had pet rats that repeatedly reproduced. He does not believe it was an intentional breeding operation. This situation was probably only out of control for 6 months, he said. Injured and sick rats have been taken to a local animal hospital to be treated, and the others have been transported to foster homes. Then they get processed and ready for adoption, Floridia said. Fewer than 10 of the rescued rats have been euthanized. Individuals and other rescue groups have stepped up to foster or adopt the rats, and some have volunteered to transport the rats to homes outside the state. The support from volunteers and other rescues has been amazing, said Erica Kutzing, Vice President and co-founder of Strong Island Animal Rescue League. About 250 rats have so far been placed in permanent homes or with fosters. Kutzing and Floridia said rats can be hard to place in homes, as they aren't typically seen as desirable pets. There's a stigma, Floridia said, acknowledging that the rodents are sometimes seen as gross or scary. He said many people don't realize that rats are actually very intelligent. They're very clean, and they make amazing pets. Like a hamster or a gerbil, they're cuddly, he added. Plus, they must be adopted in pairs or more, as they're social animals, which makes it even more challenging to get them adopted. Rats enjoy partners, Kutzing said. Humans cannot mimic the kind of social interaction they need from another rat. Kutzing and Floridia said they've been touched by how many people are invested in the rats' plight. Their Facebook updates have been flooded with concerned comments and offers to help. "They are beautiful. Thank you for saving them," one person wrote. "Can't wait to pick mine up tomorrow," another wrote, adding a rodent emoji. "I've been in rescue since 1990. The rat rescue community is by far the kindest," Kutzing said. "I think it is attributed to the fact that rats are the underdogs, and they can almost be a representation of the forgotten people, the people who don't always fit in. People resonate with rats because they are kind of seen as an outcast." The homeowner has been charged with animal cruelty, neglect, and endangering the welfare of a child, according to the Associated Press. Volunteers are continuing to work around the clock to rescue the remaining rats and get them into homes. "We are not going to stop until we find placement for everyone," Kutzing said. "We don't have any other choice." There is a picture of two of the rats that were rescued from that condemned home. They're in a cage, and there is this very cushy little rat home. It looks like the trunk of a tree. One is inside and is looking out. It's white with cute little pink ears, pink feet, and dark pink bright eyes. And another one is on the top that has a little pillow. He's laying on it, and there is a stuffed mushroom next to him. It's so cute. Photo credit, Strong Island Animal Rescue League. That story was rescuers saved 450 pet rats. Now they're trying to get people to adopt them. By the Washington Post. The next story is Man Who Had Affair with Brazilian Nanny Guilty of Killing Wife and Fall Guy. By Brian Toey. A Virginia man who was having an affair with the family's Brazilian nanny has been found guilty of murdering his wife and another man who prosecutors say was lured to the house as a fall guy. Brendan Banfield, a former IRS officer, 40, told police he found Joseph Ryan attacking his wife, Christine Banfield, with a knife on February 24, 2023. Banfield shot Ryan, and Juliana Perez Magalhães, the nanny, shot him as well. Prosecutors didn't buy Banfield's story, however, telling jurors that Banfield set Ryan up in a plan to get rid of his wife. Banfield plotted with Perez Magalhães, with whom he was having an affair, to lure Ryan into his home with a fetish website and frame him for the murder of his wife. Banfield was convicted of 2 counts of aggravated murder, a gun charge, and child endangerment. Banfield's then 4-year-old daughter was home at the time of the murders, prosecutors said. Banfield didn't show much emotion Monday as the guilty verdict from the Fairfax County jury was being read out in court. The jury got the case midday Friday and deliberated for much of Monday. He is expected to be sentenced to life in prison, Virginia's maximum penalty. Banfield's sentencing is scheduled for May 8. Monstrous actions. Fairfax County Attorney Steve Descano called Banfield's actions monstrous. "I hope he thinks about his wife in jail and about what a heinous thing he did," Descano told reporters. "Because that's something he's rightfully going to have to live with for the rest of his life." Nanny comes clean about lurid plot. Prosecutors said Banfield was in love with Perez Magalhães, and the pair plotted to get rid of his wife so they could be together. Saying she could no longer carry the guilt and the shame, the nanny turned on Banfield, testifying that they created fake accounts to pose as his wife on a fetish website in order to lure Ryan to the home under the guise of a consensual but violent sexual encounter with Christine. "I withheld the truth for a long time," just to myself, and it was a lot for me to deal with, and I just couldn't deal with this anymore," Perez Magalhaes said in court. Perez Magalhaes, who was initially charged with murder, ultimately pleaded guilty in October 2024 to a lesser count of involuntary manslaughter for fatally shooting Ryan. She cooperated with prosecutors against Banfield in exchange for a recommendation she be sentenced to time served, according to the plea agreement. Can't trust the nanny. Defense. Prosecutors argued Banfield stabbed his wife to death and shot Ryan when he intervened in the 2023 encounter between Ryan and his wife, and then staged the crime scene to make Ryan's killing appear to be an act of self-defense. Defense lawyer John Carroll said that Perez Magalhaes' testimony could not be trusted because she was cooperating with prosecutors. In his own testimony, Banfield said that her testimony was absolutely crazy. The prosecution told the jury they did not have to rely solely on the testimony of Perez Magalhaes, adding they had a plethora of evidence. An expert testified that bloodstains on Ryan's hands suggested Christine Banfield's blood had been dripped onto him from above. Perez Magalhaes was scheduled to be sentenced after Banfield's trial. Attorneys said she could walk free if she is sentenced to time served. That story was Man Who Had Affair with Brazilian Nanny, Guilty of Killing Wife and Fall Guy by Brian Towie. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 3rd issue of the Toronto Sun. Your reader has been Melanie Guralnick. Thank you for listening.